Welcome back, everyone, to the Fight Against Boredom Starborne Players podcast. We are your hosts.
I'm Feca.
I'm Albendinger.
And I'm Branxbro.
Now let's get this week's Fight Against Boredom started. Quick announcement before we jump into the episode. Our boy Feca has released the first of a new video series on the game called Feca's First that covers things that new players would hopefully find useful, helpful, and otherwise maybe entertaining. Also be looking out for Gambler's Starborne tutorials. And anyway, that's all the announcements we got. So moving on to this week's episode. Today we'll be discussing what the future of Starborne will look like, aka the beta release. We often talk about cool ways to get the community more involved for like just things like fun alternative objectives and helping the little guy get along and involved. But today we have someone that's actually trying to make all that happen. In the intro. Our hype can obviously hardly be contained as we welcome our boy Omniblivion.
Hey. Thanks.
So tell us a little about yourself, Omni. For those who've never heard of you, tell us about your position at Solid Clouds and how you got started with them. Why do you love the game, and why should we love you more than Snuggums?
Well, thank you very much. I'm Omniblivion, obviously, and I actually started off as a player, mainly in Alpha 8. Some of you may know about my Dyson that was blown up in one of the Alpha 8 servers. Hardcore player, loved the game so much that I decided to move to Iceland to work for the company. I come from the financial world. It's my background a little bit. So I primarily focus on analytics and design for Starborne. Currently working on a lot of upcoming changes for Alpha 8, for Beta. Alpha 8 was a while ago. So I do a lot of things internally. I'm kind of a jack of all trades. I try to be involved with the community as much as possible, getting feedback, talking to the players, and providing an alternative view within the company to make sure that we're approaching each issue from as many angles as possible. And I'm just the better ginger. There's no other way to say that.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, we're really excited to have you on. And I know like one of the big things that, has been speculated a lot and talked about, and something that, was kind of told would be in the tournament server would be, I guess, would you call them alternative alliance objectives? Or whatever phrasing you want to do. I know Singers really wanted P&Ms. That was his kind of thing. So if you have a good term for whatever you're working on, we'll definitely push it.
I'm just calling them paths to victory. So
Okay.
instead of just focusing on fighting over Dyson spheres and trying to get as many GTs as possible, the idea behind those was to provide alternative objectives so that the smaller groups could have an opportunity to achieve a victory. A victory doesn't necessarily mean taking over the galaxy, but a victory could be an individual objective, could be a small group objective, or even at the alliance level. Coalition warfare is fun, but not every player that hops into Starborne can participate in high-level coalition warfare.
Right. So with your things, like, so the high-level coalition stuff, is that still going to be like your main like way of winning the server? Or are you going to have multiple ways? Is everyone going to kind of contribute in different ways to potentially taking it away?
So the coalition warfare and victory objectives is kind of the pinnacle. Like, imagine this being like the Le Mans. Are you familiar with the Le Mans 24-hour race in car racing? Where you have different tiers of cars that are all racing on the same track, and each bracket basically has an opportunity to win. But there's definitely the formula or the top formula cars that are, going to be first, but each class has their own chance of victory.
So I wasn't familiar with that.
Yeah, that's cool. That's kind of what we're trying to mimic from my end here.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because you're kind of limited to how many people can be in like pre-made coalitions going for that top objective. Because frankly, running these things, like very few players are either willing or able to do it. It's just a very time-consuming thing and can take a lot of work from a lot of people. So it's a lot harder to definitely organize. And I think adding those smaller objectives that are more easily obtainable by a smaller group of people, that it opens the game up to more people, because then they don't, like right now they could hop in and they see this huge mountain to climb and it's just like, nope, not doing that.
Yeah, why start, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's another thing too. Like, let's say you're fighting for a coalition victory early and you get annihilated or something. So you make a mistake and you just get blown out of the water. It's very, like, there are ways to come back from that, but the perception is that you're struggling with such an uphill battle that it's like, why chance it to only potentially be able to be in the competition again, as opposed to having the ability to focus on other objectives that you could do instead. So, like, instead of going for the coalition victory, you then pivot to alliance-based victories.
And that's just awesome. Love it. 100%.
So what are some kind of ideas of like what these, minor objectives might be? Like, what was the scope of them?
So we already disclosed the different types of victory conditions. So obviously there's the coalition victory condition that is still in. It's the standard one, just first, second, or third based on victory points at the end of the server. And then personal victory conditions, which will be detailed with probably next week or the week after once I return to Iceland. Basically, it's like those will be achievements such as, destroy X stations or control a GT at any point, or something like that, that we can track at the end of the server. And it's, if you do those conditions, you earn a victory. One of the issues one of the hurdles that we're dealing with right now is a lot of these victory conditions require UI work, interface work, and like new art and assets that we're still developing, which is one of the reasons we haven't like full blown announced everything. But they will be in by the end of the server.
Sweet.
I'm kind of rambling on about this, but another one is the GT per capita. That's still in because it's easy for us to track at server end the number of GTs held by your group divided by the size of your group. That means if you have 5 players in an alliance and you're not part of a coalition and you own 5 GTs, then you have a GT per capita of 1, and that's a really high GT per capita.
Mm-hmm.
So that one in my mind is going to be weighed heavily because if you, in terms of rewards that will be given, because you can still be very competitive and have an impact on the coalition victory outcome. Because, coalitions, you may never be able to catch the total number of GTs that a big coalition has, but you can still do damage to them by taking over some of their GTs here and there.
Yeah, I like that a lot because especially like small groups, like you look at it like, okay, that's unfair. They only have 5 guys and they're holding 5 GTs, so we'll never reach 100% as a coalition. But on the alternate side of it is there's no way if we actually cared that much about it that they could defend those 5 versus an 100-man coalition.
Exactly. I mean, a 100-man coalition could, but yes, like if a coalition is kind of running away and they're just taking over GTs all over the galaxy, it's going to be impossible for them to defend all those GTs. So right now, there's no real value to trying to snipe those GTs from them because you're still not going to be able to catch that number 1 group. But you can definitely do damage to them and get a reward for that.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
The one victory condition that is up in the air are the alliance victory conditions. So when we first talked about them, it was a point-based system that was going to be after each week. But unfortunately, due to the space flu, it made that quite impossible to properly award alliance-based points with all the flu symptoms that were going on. So that's the one that's up in the air. I'm still trying to find a way for us to work around that and to build something off that, but it won't be announced until a little bit later, and it'll most likely be an end of server objective.
Right, especially because right now this is the 3-week mark for the server. So even if it took another week, you would only have 4 weeks to collect those objectives, which of course is a good amount of time. But at that point, any alliances that weren't part of a coalition, I think, are already kind of morale ridden, and I don't know how effective the alliance objectives would be if they're not quite soon.
Right. One of the things that I'm considering is something along the lines of around the alliance station structure and FOBs, like fully building out your alliance station and defending your fully built station. So at the end of the server, if you still had a fully built alliance station, like you would achieve an objective, something like that. But I need to make sure it's balanced so that the number 1 coalition just can't go around and bomb everyone's alliance stations just because.
Yeah, you're just giving us more targets, right?
Right. So it needs to be about, like that's the problem with coming up with these meaningful rewards is I want to make sure that like they're fun, but they're also balanced, and you just can't have a runaway group that just stomps on everyone just because.
Right. And I think anytime you're adding these, alternative objectives, it regardless, it's going to add some kind of resistance to the game. I can't just go into a sector and it just be a no man's. You're reducing a lot of the dead space, I think. As long as somebody's competing for something, they have something to stay in the game for. They might not be our direct enemy, right? But they don't want to give up their location, which is a big thing. Yeah. I can see that definitely helping with, kind of the health of the game. Yeah. But so other victory objectives, we've gone through the kind of like a single, like you said, you're potentially adding the single stuff like for solo players, and then also alliance stuff as in like GT per capita. For solo players, are you guys considering more of like you make your own alliance and you're just a one person alliance and solo objectives are kind of like per capita stuff, or are you actually just doing like a solo, like its own system as well?
It's its own system.
Ideally.
So it would be independent if you're part of an alliance or coalition. So even if you're part of those, you could still earn those victory conditions, but it would be something like raid X number of resources. Like if you complete one of those objectives, you would complete the victory, the individual victory path. So you're not restricted to being an individual.
Right. So with these two, are you planning on like doing a bunch of these additively? So I need to like do a bunch of these solo ones and whatever player has the most solo objectives done, or is it just you're winning your own prizes separately for each category?
Right now, it's you're winning your own prizes, and it's not something where you're forced to do a bunch of arbitrary tasks just to do them. It's you would have a choice. So if you're more of an industrial spec player, the objective that you would go for is something along the lines of freight X resources to the alliance station or to alliance structures, something like that. But if you're more of a hammer, then the objective you could go for would be like destroy X stations.
And would this be competitive versus other people, or are you trying to reward people just kind of as its own system?
Right now, it would be individual, its own system. The competition aspect of it, I do want something in there for a solo or individual competitive aspect, but I haven't had quite enough time yet to make a balanced proposal for that. But I'm hoping that I can get something together with enough time before the end of the server. But definitely for beta, I mean, like that's something that's definitely going to be in beta, having individual achievements has a competitive aspect to it, just because that's fun. That's you may not be part of the top coalition, but you may be the best person at blowing up stations, and they shouldn't be dependent on one another.
Yeah,
I see a lot of value in it. Fun. One thing you said, the other way is just a guideline, a path to take. Like some people are the kinds of players, they start a game and then they ask me like, what should I do? Like this would give them a direction. But also, like Alice said previously, like replayability, like playing a match and going completely for industrial and just trying to knock out all those achievements, playing another match going with the hammer play style and just trying to like hammer as much as you can and just play that style because you've seen previously that's something that you can do and be awarded for.
Yeah, that's the exact reason that we're incorporating more of these, and that the Space Flu tournament server, it was the testing ground for this. And even though we have a rocky start, we're going to continue to test it throughout the end of the server. One of the things that we do internally is we make sure that we're paying attention to all kinds of feedback from all sources. Some of you guys might know there was an article written about Starborne in, I think it was Rock Paper Shotgun, but that we didn't even know about. They didn't approach us. It was just one of their editors was playing the game, and she had a lot of positive feedback about the game. But one of the comments that stuck with me is that she specifically said, or this player said, that they didn't really know what they were fighting for. They weren't part of a big coalition, and there wasn't like an outstanding objective that they could see as a goal. And so these paths to victory are intended to be, like you mentioned, like a star, like something to aim for. It's the moon, right? You can see it in the sky, and you need to reach for the moon without being able to see it. It's really hard to know how you should be progressing or have a plan.
definitely. Yeah, that's one of the things that I took me some time when I started the game. I was like, okay, I'm here. It's interesting. It's kind of fun. It's a new thing. I like it. But what kept me around was that I started playing with a group of people, and we had this like objective that we wanted to achieve. And I think if I hadn't met these people, which are the two that I'm sitting with right here, I don't think I'd still be around, to be honest.
Yeah, and that would be the case for most players. Is they're the guys that don't find the groups right away.
Well, and I think that is kind of the end goal, right? You do want to do the big coalition stuff, but I think all these alternative objectives, at least in my opinion, are just at least getting you to that point where you finally got to meet somebody, right? If I'm doing this separate objective, I'm getting better at the game, I have something to work for, there's a better chance I find a neighbor. There's a better chance I find the local alliance because I've been playing and they're seeing my influence go up and they want to recruit me. Then you're on the way to meeting people instead of being in the game for a while, being like, I don't see the point. I haven't met anybody. No one's reaching out to me. If you're just unlucky like that,
or take the more like timid player, if you will, the guy that's less wanting to maybe reach out, or like they think that they're not going to get into a bigger coalition. This gives them, like, because they feel like they're not good enough or something, this gives them a way to feel like they're still growing and progressing at the game, because they're able to play, they're able to, compete for these smaller objectives. And once they've attained more of these objectives, that player then might be more likely to, reach out and try to get to that high level tier. Like, that they might try to go for the pinnacle then.
Right. Yeah. If you look at EVE Online, for instance, I was a big EVE Online player. I'm not going to say with which main group I was playing with, but if you're a new player in EVE Online, it's unlikely that you're going to hop into the big coalition warfare really early. If you don't know anyone, it's kind of a big scary universe. But EVE Online has a lot of individual type objectives that you can go for. You can go for the missions and progress through the mission system. They have the factions that you gain reputation with. Most online games have those. But you're still participating in this one universe where these huge coalition battles are going, and you can still make a small impact or a large impact in those coalition battles, even if you're not actively participating as one of those groups. And so for me, I see that from EVE, and having experienced that through EVE Online, I feel like it's very important for us to make sure that we embrace that with Starborne, because players, whether or not they're part of one of the top 3 coalitions or top coalitions, they should still be able to have objectives that they can fulfill and have an impact on the galaxy as a whole. So right now we only have, we have the coalition victories built in, but we're missing those stepping stones to guide players into the coalition warfare.
Man, I loved hearing this, man. This is really cool. It's an amazing perspective on, this is just something we keep on hitting on and stuff, and is going to help with attrition, it's going to help with growing the game in general. There's more than one reason to play this game. So this is beyond cool to hear, man.
Yeah, like one of the reasons that I decided to fly and move to Iceland from Southern California, where it's nice and warm and sunny, was that Starborne has, the game's still in alpha right now, and beta isn't coming until February, and there's still so much potential, untapped potential with the platform. Seeing the back end and seeing the possibilities that we can build into this game. I don't even play video games anymore because I'm so excited about what I can build or participate in building in the Starborne universe. We basically have a blank check, and the only restriction is just time. What do we focus on first? And so, we were obviously extremely excited about launching the tournament server, and we amped it up because internally we were super pumped to push this out. Obviously it didn't go as planned, but it's because we are so excited about what we can possibly do. And we just wanted to throw in all these new changes that we're super excited about as players, without fully grasping that it might cause a few bugs here and there.
Yeah. A few.
Just a couple.
That's a good segue for a question that I have for you, if I may. With how the server launch went, what are your takeaways and some of the lessons learned moving towards beta?
So this is a really good question. Some of you may have noticed or excuse me, some of you may have heard, I think in one of the community roundtables, because of my experience in the financial industry in the United States, I'm familiar with project management and specifically postmortems, analyzing a project from the inception of the project to basically the end of the project or the current day. And so I brought this mentality into the Solid Clouds team, and we did a full postmortem on the tournament server itself. One of the largest item or most highest priority items that we discussed in this postmortem was the coordination or collaboration between our design team and the marketing team. Because as you know, we heavily marketed this as a tournament server. And so the marketing team ran with that the entire time. And one of the things that we wish we could have gone back and changed was, shifted the focus a little bit away from tournament to fun server, because we wanted the server to be fun, but calling it a tournament comes with a notion that it's going to be perfectly balanced and no bugs, and it's just a purely a measure of skill across the board, when in reality we threw in so many new features that we were so excited about, like I just mentioned, that the server shifted from being this tournament environment to just a more space flu crazy fun environment. And so one of the things that we're taking with us to beta is making sure that as we launch a tournament server, it's always going to be on a stable branch. It's always going to be on something. It's not going to have new aspects in a tournament server going forward, because we want to avoid this again. That said, if we do this in the future where we're having a server with a whole bunch of new changes, that we properly collaborate internally and make sure that we're giving their correct message to the community. So yeah, I don't want to go too far into that. But yeah, so this postmortem gave us a huge number of items that we, both projects and policies internally, that we're taking with us to beta. Let me take a look at my little list here. The test. One of the second big items was the test environment that many of the super testers were delighted to be able to participate in. It was a purely fun experience for everyone the whole time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we the test process that we had with the tournament server wasn't as intended, because of the time constraints. We didn't have an appropriate structure for testing the environment with the short time frame. So going into beta, we're taking that knowledge and making sure that we're going to be launching test servers for the beta branch, 3 weeks or more prior to launch. So we have enough time to really hash out most of the bugs and issues, rather than pulling in a tournament server.
Right. So there's also a lot of, conversation around super testers. Is that something you guys plan on keeping going into beta and utilizing players like that?
So yes, I think I'm not involved directly with the super tester group, but from my interpretation of what's going on, I believe we're going to be creating a new group that's to test specific balance things. It's going to be a more structured environment for beta. So that'll be one group, and then we will also have a load test environment for that everyone can join. So.
Oh, that'd be very cool. Because we utilize, it's not even necessarily, obviously we do as much as we can before the server as well, but even during the server, it's nice to have somewhere where, does the FAB have sabotage defense? We could go ping it real quick. You know what I mean? With right now,
right.
We're able to use it just because we're super testers, but having something that you can go test. I mean, how does an assault work for a new player? Instead of me making this video, which I was able to do, but also just having them go ahead and just hop on. I don't want to waste my 2 weeks of progress building up these gunships and stuff. I think that would be highly beneficial for the community.
Yeah. So that's just one of the, those are a couple of things that we learned from the postmortem, and we're taking all of that knowledge that we learned from the tournament server and applying that to the beta launch.
That's really good to hear, man. Because I know a lot of people, and you are lucky, to have a community that's so vocal. They're out there in one way or another, depending on how they did it. But it's really cool to hear you guys, taking notes onto that, and seeing, how you want to go forward. So.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, even though it didn't go as planned, we still learned a ton from this entire process, and that's I mean, we're still in alpha, so we're this is our first game that we're releasing as a company, and we're making sure that everything that we do, we're learning from it,
just like a Starborne player.
Exactly.
Every mistake you make, go ahead and just scratch that one out and be like, all right, next time. So that's cool.
You guys, you do play as well, right?
Yeah. So I'm not playing competitively on the current tournament server simply because I was doing the GM work, and so I had technically an unfair advantage because I was able to see more than I should have with the GM tools. So I'm refraining from playing competitively on this server, but I do still actively play on a different server under a different name that I'm not going to disclose.
Now, I think that's something that's really important for people that are involved in like balancing and design, just game development, to play their own game, to get a feel for it, like how stuff works. Like it's, for example, UI stuff. Like you design a UI, you think it works until you interact with it on a daily basis and see like how some of the stuff is completely annoying or just doesn't work the way you imagined. But even just like game pacing and balance, like if you're disconnected from the game, you're not going to understand some of the problems. But if you actively use your product, you're going to be able to better understand what needs to change,
Right.
and what works really well.
Exactly. Yeah. So the majority of the staff are playing on the tournament server. I drew the short straw and got the privilege, I guess, of doing the GM work. So I kind of had to step away from playing competitively. But I actually, speaking of the other developers playing, I kind of wanted to put in some sort of reward for blowing up Snookums. That'd be cool.
We'll take it. He took one of our GTs. So we'll go ahead and grab that one.
Yeah.
But no, that's actually something, I talk to a lot of new players, and I do a lot of the politics for Gravity. And when I reach out, that's actually one thing that I think gets mentioned a lot, because I think most of the developers are actually playing under, an alternative name, as far as I know. At least I haven't seen them.
Yeah.
But the new guys are like, oh, I heard you're the ones with the developers on your team, and it's like, like that feels bad. But at the same time, like mentioning all of this, it's still in the alpha. They're really not using anything to your advantage. Like you're saying, you even took yourself away from the game because you thought you might have an unfair advantage. And I want to make that kind of clear to a lot of people. And every side has them. And I'm like, the one guy I was talking to is like, you don't know, you might have a dev in your group. You know what I mean? And it's really not some like crazy objective, especially because you guys are so busy. People in our lives know, if you want to get a hold of, EXO, a lot of times will go like stealth mode. You can't hear from him for a while. Same with Snookums. He's not using our chat like ever. And I think the CEO is working over there with Biggles, but he's saying the same thing, right? Like it's not some crazy ridiculous advantage. And I think in the long term, it's awesome for the game because the people that also are skeptical of using the test servers and stuff, that's not anywhere near the actual game, right? You can't tell what's going on with game playing on a test server where you only have maybe 5 people in your sector, if you're lucky enough to be doing a full game, if you don't have dev tools on in the test server. So I think it's hugely beneficial, and I think the devs are all kinds of spread out, and I also don't think it's some advantage. Obviously, I may be biased being on the inside of knowing some of this stuff, but I want to make that aware for any new players that are listening that think, oh, that might be a little off to hear, the game developers might be playing. But just touching on some of the reasoning for it.
Yeah, I mean, it's at this point, there's always going to be the two sides. It's like the devs shouldn't be involved in or whatever, the fear of an unfair advantage. But at the same side, or on the other side, the point you mentioned about it's super important for us to have a grasp of the actual gameplay. And so the only way for us to actually attain that knowledge is to participate in these large scale coalition warfare that we can't replicate on a development test server.
Right. And I employ anyone that thinks it's unfair, PM me and I will trade you EXO. It's all good fun.
And if I get my way with the passive victory, Snookums and Grettir better watch out.
Yeah. Take out a CEO. Well, that's an interesting one. Yeah, that's awesome.
But like playing the game as someone who's been there and the whole design process, is there something now that you've got your hands on the quote unquote finished product that surprised you, that worked out differently, or are there any surprises for you?
I'm super happy with FOBs. So the positives are FOBs, because those are turning into the idea behind FOBs was conflict points. Because without FOBs, there was the Navy bases, and Navy bases, I don't know if you guys had much experience with those, but I hated them.
Yep.
They're the worst. It was sure, it was nice to be able to impact anywhere across the galaxy in 10 hours, but it led to these huge, like, super mega coalitions that didn't even need to be a part of a coalition in the game mechanics. They could just have an agreement that if anyone attacked them, they would all just gang up on whoever attacked them, and they could all coordinate their attacks. It was just it didn't work out very well.
Yeah, there's no way to strike back with Navy bases.
Exactly.
And for those who don't know what those necessarily are, or not familiar, if you're just kind of starting with the tournament, it was an outpost that you put down, and all your travel times are 10 hours maximum. So you could be for example, in Cassiopeia, attacking Serpents on the other side of the map in 10 hours, and everyone could do it.
I'm intimately aware of how Navy bases work.
Anyone that's been playing for a while has gotten burned by just mass Navy base coordination, and it's just and there's no way to.
There's no strike back.
There's no strike back. They're coming from everywhere. I do
you
like
it and accept your fate.
I do like what you said with the FOBs, though, the forward operating bases, is that conflict center, or however you phrased it. I really do, and I see that, and you can feel it when a FOB jumps. It actually alerts everyone now, I think, right? At least when it's built, it alerts. It jumps, and it's like it's a thing everyone has to worry about. We have FOBs coming in right now, and that's actually, we don't have a live audience right now because you guys got us right as we started, and all of Gravity's over there dealing with that now, as well as the rest of the coalition. So it's a serious thing. Unlike when Navy bases attacked, it's like, there's nothing we can really do. Everybody come just watch this podcast and goof off. So yeah, it's definitely making an impact, and I do like the directions of forward operating bases so much, right? And it just makes your mind kind of wander about all these other, things you can do. So I get excited. Yeah,
it's very neat because it makes terrain matter, and like your placement, your movement of the FOB matters, and it's more of a progressive, gaining more and more territory as opposed to just turtling in one place and launching 10-hour attacks over and over.
Right. Oh yeah, because you're using the map. You're growing. It's kind of like we talk about like trench warfare, and the FOB comes in and kind of is like your heavy artillery and kind of breaks some of the lines, so you can start moving and it's worth moving your stations up, and you can actually use, a cluster of stations is still considered, like, at least in our opinion, like stronger than a FOB, right? You can definitely defend it. A lot of people, I think, see the FOB come in and they're like, well, we're done for. But that's also a cool feeling too, of being able to move in. But there is so many ways of solo fighting back against one. As you saw, Winged Hussars kind of took advantage of us, and they were able to take our FOB out. We thought was like, this thing's awesome. This thing's built up. We got all the fleets we could ever want, and they're still able to take it down, destroy it. So I think it's in a really good balanced spot. FOBs have really revolutionized how the game's played, and I've loved it.
It's not an I win button. It's a tool, and it depends heavily on the wielder, like how skilled are they and how they use it.
Yeah, and how you coordinate with your coalition to, assault multiple fronts, because they can't defend all fronts at the same time from FOB attacks. So, if you're doing a multi-pronged approach, then it's easier to achieve victory on the assault.
Yeah, the people on the outside looking in too, I don't think you don't get to see the inner workings of it, but it's like getting everyone, like, you kind of want people with the same time zones on in a FOB. Like, everyone has to assault at the same time. You can't dodge really with a FOB because you're going to be missing half the people at any given time unless you're really lucky. So there's a lot of stuff with the FOB that it doesn't look like it on the surface, but as you dig deeper, it's like there's a lot of mechanics working, and there's so much coordination going into how a FAB moves, how it's working, what you're doing, how you're feeding it back up. So it takes a lot of skill, in my opinion, to make it work and to not jump into bad positions. And there's so many ways to capitalize on my mistakes with a FAB. So it's just been such a cool mechanic in general.
The highest skill thing of the FAB, I think, is coming up with a good name.
Yeah. We spent a lot of time on that. So that's
Yeah, well, so FABs have been around since the beginning of Alpha 9. But are there some things like with the current like tournament flu server, all the new stuff that you enjoy a lot, Omni?
So, can you repeat that one more time? Sorry.
Are there any of the new things that came with the current games, the tournament flu, space flu server, some of the new stuff that you enjoy a lot or that caught you off guard?
The building planner, it was a huge add to that. I love the new building planner. The old one I felt was super like too linear. It was just a tree, and there were only a couple of buildings you actually wanted, and you had to like build all these arbitrary buildings to get to it. But the building planner allows you to customize your stations fully. I still feel like it needs a balance pass just to make sure all all the buildings are fun as possible. But still being able to kind of customize each station. And eventually when we get the building planner templates in, you'll be able to share different builds with your alliance and coalition potentially.
Oh, wow.
That's something that's on the drawing board. I don't know when it will be finished, but that's part of the design of the building planner, is having the ability to like share these layouts.
Kind of like spy reports, would you say? Like you can click like copy to clipboard and like send it to someone, or how are you thinking about sharing that?
I'm not directly working on that one, but my impression is that in theory you should be able to copy your build. I believe there's going to be a planning screen where you can see or have access to all the buildings and all the outposts and build out this plan, and then share that plan with other players that they can upload into their plan screen. And then on the actual build screen, or the build menu, you should be able to select a plan, and it will like tell you what buildings go in which slot and that kind of thing. Again, it's still being developed on the back end, so I haven't seen the latest build of it, but I think that's the route that we're going with.
Wow, that's awesome, man.
It's interesting that you're saying that you want to do a balance pass. I mean, like obviously, sure, like balance passes should happen every now and then. But I think like when I build a new station and I look at the buildings, there is some that I think like, why would I want to build this? Clearly doesn't help me on this station. But then different station, different place, different need. That building is like the best ever, like best invention since sliced bread. I want this now. There are some buildings that have actually surprised me just how much I like them. One of them being the campaign directorate, which buffs operating fleets. Like that must have flown under the radar for me personally when I looked at all the new buildings prior to the launching of this server. But nowadays, like it's one of the buildings when I think like, oh, I'm going to use this station for be it offensive stuff or just mission running or whatever. It's just going to make everything I do better. Or like the scan speed stuff, like scanning super fast across different sectors. Or I think something that a lot of people were surprised by was the building that allows us to have industrial fleets that cost no labor at all.
Trucker
for free.
I was one of them. That was awesome. I really like it.
Well, and then comboing it. So that's the one building, the Truckers Hall and the Colonial Command, like right at the tier above. You combo those in one station. And since you can supply every single industrial fleet with that one station, you never need to build those two buildings again, which is also a very interesting interaction, which I don't know if that was intended because of that. But I've really enjoyed that. And just to be done with it, and I don't think about it, and I put all my industrials there.
That's supplied. I guess I've always read that as operating. Oh, my Lord.
Don't build it more than once. You only need
that's definitely a skill in this game. like reading comprehension and like understanding, really internalizing the difference between supplied and operating. That's something I had to learn during the first server I ever played. Like, okay, and I really plan ahead with that.
Yeah, with Chuckers Hall, I wouldn't mind that being operational, just so I feel like I need to build it in more than one station. Obviously, I'm not complaining because I like it, but
yeah. So the buildings that's how they were designed. They're designed to be like you have one station that's dedicated to supplying your industrials. Industrials are in a weird spot because they do have a lot of good uses up until a certain point, and then their uses kind of fall off. They become very limited. And so you're not going to be like, you don't need 40 industrial fleets ever. There's never a circumstance where you'd need 40 industrial fleets. And
right.
So like industrials currently can't do missions. They can do solar flares, which is kind of a mission for industrials. But if you don't have a solar flare, there's nothing you could do with your industrials unless you're like upgrading outposts or whatnot. So
building a FAB or building a line station only happens like 4 times if you're lucky.
Exactly. Well, yeah. Hopefully more than that if your FOBs are getting blown up, but
hopefully not. Hopefully they're not blowing up. That's what I was trying to get to. But yeah.
But that said, part of the thing that I'm talking about with balance with the building planner is that so you build those 2 buildings that are so good having on one station. The problem is that in subsequent stations, you don't ever need to build those buildings again, but those buildings are one of 4 industrial buildings at that level, right? So balance doesn't necessarily mean changing the existing buildings, but adding more buildings that feel good as other options. Because because you don't like you mentioned, you wouldn't ever build another one of those supplied industrial fleet buildings because you only need one ever.
Right.
But it's still it feels great on a building, and that station's like supply, like that's your purely industrial supply station, which feels great to specialize that station. But in other industrial type stations, you want I want to make sure that there are enough choices that you're not forced into picking 2 from 2 other industrial buildings because you never need to build that one again.
Yeah, no, that's great that you touched on that, because that's actually the biggest thing I realized with the building planner is the new building. If you come up with an idea for a building, you guys can just sling it in there. Unlike prior, where you have the tree, there's like, I have to take something out to put something in, or I have to figure out a new tree thing. If you guys come up with a new building, you guys it's kind of like how the new policy system worked, where if you guys think of a cool idea, I just add a new policy, and move on, and then you have maybe you do one of each of the other 2 as well, because I know there's a lot of 3s, right, between industrial, military, and domain. But still, it's so much easier to edit the game. And I think that's great for the health of the game, the future of the game. And it's just exciting. If you guys announce in this next server, we're adding this new building, that'd blow our minds, right? And that'd be really cool.
So to me, it's not just like building another station anymore either. Like before you knew your path, there was not much thought involved. I want this outpost, I want this company. So I know exactly what I'm clicking. This time, I know I want 6 of that kind, 7 of that kind, but which of those do I want?
Mm-hmm.
Am I close to a star? Am I going to do a lot of solar harvest or now? Or I'm going to raid? Or
one of those aspects I find that I can think about more of now, which I thought much less of before, because as Branx said, it was your tree, you're kind of going down it. We've always had the buildings where you get supplied fleet bonuses. So supplied carriers get a little extra, supplied frigates get a little extra firepower hit points. That was always a thing, but I found it really hard to kind of because we had to deal with habdome stations, and you only had a few stations with labor, and now specifically also with the streaming mechanic, I find that I'm finding it easier to decide ahead of time what stations are going to supply what types of fleets, and actually make that happen. Whereas before, it was so much harder to know, as it was a little bit more buried in the tree.
Yeah, I think it's a much more rewarding process as well, to see something come from beginning to end, and you have planned it out the whole time, and now it's doing this. I've really enjoyed it for sure.
Oh, Flares
What's
just
up?
hit. I'm sorry, Flares just hit.
Solar flares. The notification thing. I love the notification screen, and I'm super happy that you added a clear all button. because I think like 650 notifications. Like, it just couldn't be ours to going through and clicking away all of them. It's becoming a meme that, hey guys, don't miss it, solar flares are up, because it's just so in your face.
Yeah, I have 1,500 notifications. I'm not using the clear all button out of out of stubbornness because it wasn't there originally. Now I'm just going for peak.
You're going for the personal victory of having the most notifications?
Yeah. I'm waiting for Omni. I have good word. Omni's going to add a most notifications victory board. I'm going to hit it.
A way to min-max that system is to probe all the stars on the map so you see the most solar flares.
There you go.
Well, you get Zerg right on it, right? Yeah.
So I had another thought, actually, not to go back too much, but on the topic of like personal objectives and stuff, will there also be a global leaderboard? And what I mean by that is, like, we have leaderboards per game, and we have on the Empire's menu, like, you're tracking loot, missions, and claim, and a lot of neat little statistics. But is there a way that we're going to be tracking that, like, across servers? So, like, what player overall has blown up across, however many times he's played, who's gotten the most influence, who's gotten the most loot,
Yes, that is planned, but not soon.
That's interesting.
So it's not going to be for beta, but that's definitely like the account level items, or things that we're going to be adding to the game are a huge design path internally that we're following. But we're making sure the servers are stable first. The gameplay works as intended, that kind of thing.
Yeah, because again, it's back to the fairness and
right. But we want to make sure that maybe you don't need to go for a coalition victory in a server. Like, as you guys know, participating in coalition warfare can be demanding, right? It takes a lot of energy, mental energy.
It is demanding.
Yes.
What is sleep?
What is can be. Yeah.
So what we want to do is make sure that players are still rewarded for just playing a casual game, playing, there were a lot of people in Alpha 8 that were doing like role playing, the Yellow Dynasty or whatever, those guys that were RPing as the old Han Dynasty, or the Space Cowboys or whatever, like the
Space Cowboys.
you should be able to have fun in servers and still gain value in your account, because right now we don't have that like account value gain for each server that you participate in, aside from blueprint points and policies and that kind of thing. But yes, having those like global tracking and badges. Ask iMaple about the progress of badges when you see him next. Everyone PM iMaple and ask him about badges.
You're playing a dangerous game, man.
You'll, like, players will be able to acquire these badges and trophies on their account that when you're playing on a server, people can see, like, we'll be able to see all the badges and rankings and stuff that you've acquired at the account level. So that's stuff that we're definitely going to add.
I think the alternate win conditions or the alternate things to go for are going to be really good for the game, because right now it seems very one-dimensional, right? That the vector to win a match is coalition warfare or grab the most GTs. And if you don't have the time or you're not interested in it, then it's like you're not going for the win. A lot of people are going to ask you, like, why are you even playing if you're not going for that win? But being able to do other things is like, yeah, people can do the coalition warfare. You can do something else. That you can really find your little niche of what you like to do. It's going to make the game so much more alive and fuller, I think.
Right. And in conjunction with the tutorial that's being developed for the beta launch, that'll better detail like all these individual objectives that players can go for, especially for the newer community. Because as I mentioned, like, we want to make sure that new players can see this objective that they can reach in a server. They're not going to, they might not be able to participate in the highest end coalition warfare on their first server, but they can still, reach these goals that will be attainable.
That's very cool, man. Are you able to touch any more on like any bit of the tutorial? Being like, is it more along the lines of more tasks, or are you guys actually trying to like what even is the scope of how a tutorial would even be in this game?
So, from my understanding, it's an overlay that literally walks players through some of the early interactions. We're going to be releasing the tutorial in iterations. So the first iteration is going to be like a very direct, like here's how you launch fleets. Like click this fleet, right click on a hex, click deploy or assault or whatever. So it'll be a very handheld walkthrough, not just the task system. And then we'll continue to expand that with future iterations.
That sounds awesome, man.
Yeah, it's something that I've been asking for internally forever, since the 60s, but because of all the changes, like for instance, if we had a tutorial, it would have been completely broken with the new building planner. It wouldn't have worked. So now that those are getting solidified and hardened, we can now invest a lot of time and energy in a tutorial because there aren't going to be significant UI changes and stuff like that to the mechanics for the beta launch.
For my thought process too, I think this goes also with you guys having a mobile idea of the game planned, but the same thing, if you guys are changing this big of things, not only now are you changing this code, you'd have to change mobile and stuff like that. So I imagine that's why you guys probably also are waiting on kind of that direction as well, because I know that is a really big selling point for a lot of new players as well. I don't have to be in front of my computer all day. I could have a break and just check my phone.
Yeah, so a lot of the work going on behind the scenes with the new server and the SignalR implementation and some of the stuff we're doing in the back end is in preparation for a mobile companion app. It won't be like trying to go backwards and making Starborne work on a mobile platform,
right?
With 100% of the features probably won't happen in anytime soon. However, the value of creating a companion app that allows you to communicate with your alliance and coalition and see events and notifications from your phone and really enable you to see what's going on in the galaxy without having to be sitting at your computer is very important to us. So I don't have any time frame on that, but
we're not.
But we are, like I said, a lot of the backend work we are doing on these servers are giving us better options for such a development in the future.
Right. Talking about time frame, is February still go ahead for beta?
Yeah, February is beta launch. So
and I know your other project is the idea for a beta map, which may be something different. Are you able to touch any bit on that for us and the viewers?
Yeah. So the idea with a new map is kind of a nod to the Alpha 7 map, where it was a spiral galaxy. So this one that I'm working on isn't exactly a spiral, but the mechanics behind it is that players will start in these like starting areas that have a moderate amount of resources. So more advanced players are going to be incentivized to move towards the center and condense and get into combat, and not just huddle down and envelop new players. So like more experienced players will want to be expanding towards the center rapidly, building up their strongholds, working on coalition objectives, that kind of thing, closer to the center, while new players can get their bearings and kind of stay a little bit more on the outskirts, to give them a little bit more room to learn and grow. So the overall design is still going to retain the hex shape that you see now, but instead of Lupus being the center of the galaxy and people spawning there to try to get some advantage, or Libra, excuse me.
Yeah.
It started with an L. It's early here.
You're close enough. Sorry.
I'm on vacation. Hey.
Yeah. I just want to make sure we're talking. Yeah.
So instead of Libra being a starting position in the center of the galaxy with everyone surrounding you, Libra will be locked off. People won't be able to spawn there. People will only be able to spawn on the outer rings, and will have to migrate their way towards the center.
With your current idea, are you also locking out then also like Lupus, Phoenix, Pegasus, Hydra, like all of the middle, or are you keeping those as spawns as well?
No, so the spawn locations will only be in the outer ring. So
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Mm.
So
Are you
That'd
going to
be
be able
neat.
to select the starting sector,
Right,
or
as
is
far
it
as
just going to
pre-made
be
in general.
the map?
yeah, so it will right now the current design is that you'll be able to select a general area, but not the exact sector. Like, so if you're starting with a
Ooh.
pre-made, you won't be able to all select the same one sector to spawn in.
That's good.
I'm
So it'll
honestly
be a
excited
little
about
more
that,
spread.
man. That
Yeah.
takes a lot of planning out of our hands. Also, just go in that general direction. And let's have some fun. That's
Yeah.
really interesting.
So yeah, you pick like a kind of a quadrant that you're going to spawn in, which could be one of a couple different sectors. But ideally, you're not going to want to stay in those sectors because if you look at the outposts for the heavy ship assembly right now, it looks at the moons that the heavy ship assembly is next to, and there just simply won't be the best possible HSA spots in the starting zones. So you'll want to move towards the center to get those large medium moon combos because they just don't exist on the outer ring.
So Libra is turning into the prime real estate then.
All the center ones, yeah.
Well, no. So Libra is going to be a little different, and I'll talk about that later. But it won't. It'll have actually less resources than everything else, but it will have quite a few additional features that you would want to fight over towards the end of the server.
Mm.
Oh, tease me more.
yeah. Wow, that's really cool. And even with, I can even see myself maybe using the self-destruct button on my first station, like after I got a good base, up in these middle sectors, just ditching the old one and that's a pretty interesting concept in its own as well.
Yeah, that's actually a behavior that we're going to try to reward. Because your starting station, if you're a more advanced player, ideally your starting station in the starting zone wouldn't be the best place to have a station.
It sucks.
Right. So, but we don't want to, one of the things I'm trying to make sure is done properly is that you're not penalized for getting rid of your starting station. Like your starting station should be something that you build up and get a foothold, and then you start expanding into the more favorable zones. And then once you have a foothold in those favorable zones, you can, replace or move your first station or destroy your first station and quickly recoup that those influence that you lost from that starter station. So you don't feel like you have to leave that station there.
Wow. That's really interesting news, man. That's very cool.
Yeah, and that way, more advanced players will generally shift towards the center, while newer players can still expand and grow, and they'll have, there's still stuff to do in the starting areas. It's just not the best spot for coalition victory.
Right. That's really interesting. And I don't know if you guys are familiar. There's a game called Rust that has repeating servers, and they actually have the same idea. That's kind of in my head, like the outside's like the beaches. And as you get more inside, there's the bigger monuments and the more impressive things, and where all the good stuff that you can get that really is only relevant to the bigger clans and stuff that are up there. But then you can also kind of dilly-dally on the outsides if you want to role play, if you want to do this stuff, and you also do still have an impact. It's just you're not going for those more competitive spots that you're also going to get blown up if you go to the middle. So it might even be a better strategy just to hang on the outside and do different stuff. So it opens up all kinds of different ways of going about it. It's exciting, man.
Yeah,
and as always, there's a certain design intent, and then the meta develops, and that doesn't always align with the design intent.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of the joys of trying to create a new map from scratch.
Yeah.
But this is something, part of this process of designing this map for beta is part of a procedural thing internally that we're doing. We want to make sure that we're constantly spicing up the universe, and different servers could have different types of maps and different layouts. We can test out what is the most fun. If you look at the Path of Exile mentality, they do the league or season. I forget what they call it. Leagues, yeah, where they have the league servers that are kind of fresh starts that have these new features or mechanics or map delving features. So we want to kind of do something similar where we release servers that have different map types or different rule sets, that kind of thing, and take the ones that players find the most fun and continue to expand upon those.
Yeah, that way you can experiment, and if it doesn't work out, right? You weren't afraid to try. You learned from it, or if it does work out, you can introduce it to the game as a permanent feature.
Yeah, and so that's what's exciting about this process. So we're going to continue. It's all about iteration, making the game more and more fun, making the game, something that you're not forced to sit and play it competitively year round. You can play a competitive server and then play a couple casual servers and just mess around and have fun with friends, and then when a new map comes out that you're super excited about, get back into competitive mode.
Oh yeah, I can definitely not keep up the competitive gameplay all the time.
Exactly.
It's so taxing. I just want to sleep.
Yeah.
Yeah, in my mind, like as a player, not as a developer, but as a player, like I see Starborne and I see this game that I could be playing off and on for years and years and years. Because like you said, it is taxing to be competitive, not just in Starborne, but in any game. I used to play competitive Dota, and I just had I just couldn't continue to play at a competitive level. Like I had to play a bunch of mini games just because it's so taxing. And with Starborne, we have the tools here to make this environment where you can just play and have fun, play super casually, and then you have these competitive environments where it's like, okay, I'm going to buckle down, and the next 60 days or of gameplay, I'm going to be super competitive mode.
Mm-hmm. I was really proud earlier when you were talking about the casual players, and I was like, man, did he play casually with us back on server 7? I was really proud when he made that
server
comment.
10, like the casual gameplay, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, server 10, that's right.
Yeah, that's what we're trying to do. We are kind of trying to do that even on our own. We switch between, we have this Fight Against Boredom alliance that we run that's just like our fun alliance. We kind of named the podcast like along the lines of that. And then we switch to Gravity when we're like, all right, we're really going to go competitive. And we're trying to even make the differences in our own alliance. So it's cool to see the games also, trying to cater to that thing that we're already experiencing and realizing, all right, sometimes we just need to take a break, right? We just need to, I still want to play. I still love the game, but I don't want to play on that competitive level. If you're playing competitive Dota, you're playing competitive League, it is that same amount of taxation.
And that's where all these mechanics, like the independent, like individual rewards or big passive victory and account level achievements and tracking, that kind of thing, it's still providing you value and rewards for just playing, whether or not you're going for the big victory or not. So those will help provide more and more value and make the experience more rewarding.
Absolutely, man.
Well, I think that's probably a pretty good place for us to wrap up on a nice, good high note.
Yeah. Unless there's anything else you need to add, Omni, this has been absolutely fantastic.
Been great. Yeah.
Wonderful.
No, thank you guys for having me on this. Hopefully you can tell, despite my little head cold I have here, I mean, it's so exciting to be working on the game. I moved to a whole really cold country just to work with the company. I moved from sunny California to sunny Southern California all the way to Iceland. And because it's just exciting to have this template that we have this template of a game that we're still continuing to iterate on, and the game's already fun. It has a competitive aspect, and the sky is the limit, no pun intended, but we can do so much with this, and it's just so exciting to continually iterate and get everyone's feedback. So thank you guys for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for coming on board and letting us pick your brain during the holiday break. And I guess a quick thanks to the whole Solid Clouds team for helping support us in this podcast as well, and helping us get our little thing going. We enjoyed listening to all your insights into the coming beta, and as always, the hype is still real as ever. Covered a lot of good topics about what we liked, about the changes to the game, a lot about the health of the game and where it's going. And I got to say, I'm looking forward to everything. Again, everyone listening, Feca and Gambler have started some tutorial videos to help out new players understand the game. So be looking out for those. And be sure to go give them some likes and subscribes on that old YouTube. It's a good stopping point. So everyone make sure to stay casual. Keep up that fight against boredom.
Ping Nihilus.
Ping Nihilus.
Ping Nihilus. Ping Nihilus and Ping iMaple.
Yeah. That's really nice.
Inquire about the badges.
Yeah, inquire about badges. Yeah. That's how you get your first badge. That's
my maple badge.